The Fallout series has had its fair share of iconic factions. And in a world scorched by nuclear warfare, there is one that has persisted throughout each and every title in the series, known as the Brotherhood of Steel. Undoubtedly the Fallout franchise's most iconic faction, known for their advanced technology, militaristic structure, and of course, their power armor. With the Brotherhood undoubtedly playing a big role in the second season of the Fallout TV show, it's important to know about their history throughout the games. So without further ado, here is the entire history of the Brotherhood of Steel. Before the Great War, Westech, a military research corporation, was operating under a top-secret contract with the United States government to engineer a chemical compound capable of creating super soldiers for the war effort against China. This compound would come to be known as the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV for short, supposedly capable of enhancing the abilities of any creature it infected, though not without its consequences. On January 7, 2077, FEV experiments would begin at the newly constructed Mariposa military base in Central California. The facility was placed under the guard of Colonel Robert Spindle and his men, who were blissfully unaware of the true nature of the experiments they were assigned to protect. That all changed on October 10, 2077, when the soldiers discovered the horrific truth, that the FEV was being tested on live human subjects, twisting them into grotesque abominations. Disgusted and outraged at what they had been protecting, the men took the scientists prisoner and demanded they be executed for their crimes against humanity. Amid the chaos, their leader, Colonel Spindle, unable to cope with the horrors he had witnessed, suffered a nervous breakdown and barricaded himself in his office, leaving his second-in-command, Captain Roger Maxson, to take control of the situation. Over the following days, tensions escalated, as Maxson was forced to step in when a soldier nearly shot one of the scientists in a fit of rage. After ordering his men to stand down, he vowed to interrogate the researchers himself, believing they had gone rogue and that the government would never sanction such experiments. During the first interrogation, Mariposa's chief researcher, Robert Anderson, pleaded with Maxson, insisting that the creation of the FEV was in fact ordered by the United States government. When Maxson refused to believe him, Anderson broke down, shouting that he was just following orders. This caused Maxson to snap, and in his rage he drew his weapon and executed Anderson. Following this incident, Maxson and his men attempted to retrieve the traumatized colonel from his office. However, when they finally breached the door, the colonel had taken his own life. From that point on, each of the interrogations ended in executions, until one researcher, Aaron Shellman, finally proved to Maxson that the United States had indeed authorized the FEV experiments. After executing the rest of the scientists, Maxson, horrified that his own government could sanction such atrocities, took to the base's communications and declared to any government personnel on the other end that he and his unit were seceding from the United States. Maxson and his men awaited retaliation, or at least a response from their superiors, but nothing came. The next day, with no word from the government, Maxson, sensing something was wrong, ordered the soldier's family to take shelter inside Mariposa, bracing for whatever might come next. Then, on October 23, 2077, the Great War began. In a matter of hours, the world was engulfed in nuclear fire, and civilization as they knew it was reduced to ashes. After the bombs had fallen, Maxson would prepare his men and their families to leave the facility, fearing that it may still be a target for the Chinese military. And on October 27th, Maxson would lead his men and their families out into the wasteland. After a long journey south and sustaining several casualties, the group finally reached a government bunker known as Lost Hills. With the horrors of Mariposa and the Great War still fresh in his mind, Maxson sought to build something new in the ashes of the apocalypse. An organization free from the US government and its failures. After all that had happened, Maxson had come to the conclusion that man's abuse of science and technology is what led to the nuclear collapse of society. And it was this ideology that would lead to the creation of the Brotherhood of Steel. A self-governed faction comprised of soldiers loyal not to a nation, but to a purpose, which was to seek out and preserve advanced technology in the hopes of keeping it out of the hands of those who may abuse it, in order to prevent mankind from destroying itself once again. Now is where we move all the way from the West Coast to the state of West Virginia, where a group of U.S. Army Rangers led by Lieutenant Elizabeth Taggarty would unexpectedly receive contact from none other than Roger Maxson. Maxson would brief Taggarty and her soldiers on the horrors he had witnessed at Mariposa, encouraging their group to renounce their loyalty to the U.S. government. While Taggarty and her soldiers were initially skeptical of Maxson's claims, their group would eventually join the Brotherhood, after discovering for themselves an FEV research facility in the heart of Appalachia. By the 2080s, Taggarty, who was granted the rank of Paladin, would begin recruiting former military survivors into her Appalachian chapter of the Brotherhood. In the year 2082, the Brotherhood was struggling to contain the population of super mutants growing out of the previously mentioned FEV facility in the town of Huntersville. This led to Taggarty and her men seizing munitions from a group of survivors known as the Responders. This would cause tensions to rise between the Brotherhood and the civilian factions of Appalachia. However, cooler heads would prevail as the Brotherhood would forge an alliance with the Responders and fight side by side in a collaborative assault on Huntersville, temporarily neutralizing the super mutant threat. Their success would continue as Taggarty and her men had carved out new territory for the Brotherhood to operate out of and had forged key alliances across Appalachia. Following their victory at Huntersville, Roger Maxson, who had granted himself the rank of High Elder, would make an announcement that the Brotherhood must shift its focus from helping the people of the wasteland and instead dedicate itself to preserving old world technology and knowledge, as he believed it was the key to rebuilding civilization. With their new mission to seize technology for themselves, the Brotherhood shifted focus, moving away from protecting civilians and solely towards securing pre-war technology to rebuild civilization under their control, even going so far as to cease recruiting civilians into their ranks. While some hailed this new direction as noble, others saw it as the Brotherhood turning their backs on the people they had once sworn to protect in favor of hoarding pre-war technology. This division among their ranks would become the least of their worries, however, as large bat-like creatures began to appear in the Cranberry Bog region of Appalachia. These creatures would become known as Scorch Beasts, and began to spread a plague across the region, turning humans into deformed feral creatures known as the Scorched. According to the Brotherhood's head scribe, Haley Takano, the Scorch Beasts, codenamed Sierra Bravos, posed an extinction-level threat that could wipe out what remained of humanity. After learning of this, Maxson and his Brotherhood at the Lost Hills bunker would send aid as well as weapon schematics in an attempt to support their Appalachian comrades. But in the early 2090s, their cross-country satellite comms began to fail, cutting Appalachia off from the Lost Hills chapter of the Brotherhood. But just before the communications between the two chapters were lost, Maxson would issue his final orders to Paladin Taggarty. According to their last recorded conversation, Taggarty tells Maxson there are simply too many Scorch Beasts, and that their current tactics are only delaying the inevitable. She proceeds to tell him that one of their scribes discovered a nuclear silo in Appalachia that was still intact, which they could use to wipe out the Scorch Beasts once and for all. Upon hearing this, Maxson angrily shuts down the idea, saying nukes must never be used again after causing the end of the world, ordering Taggarty not to use the nukes and ending the discussion. Following these final orders, the Brotherhood would begin to struggle in their fight against the Scorch Beasts, losing territory, supplies, and soldiers, eventually forcing them to regroup all of their forces to their bases of Fort Defiance and Thunder Mountain. By 2094, the Brotherhood's campaign against the Scorch Beasts was failing, desperately seizing food, missiles, fusion cores, and whatever they could get their hands on that would aid in their fight. In a desperate attempt to wipe out the threat, the Brotherhood would launch Operation Touchdown on January 28, 2095, in which Paladin Taggarty would lead her best soldiers in an assault on what they believed to be the source of the Scorch Beasts. Tragically, the operation would claim the life of Paladin Taggarty and her men, failing to eliminate the threat and leaving the Brotherhood without a leader. By the beginning of the summer that same year, Scorch Beast sightings were rising fast, and by August, the Brotherhood was on the brink of extinction. On August 18, 2095, only 5 Brotherhood members remained at Fort Defiance. There, they would make their final stand, but before their deaths, they made sure to send out a broadcast message that read, "Defiance has fallen." The very next day, Thunder Mountain fell as well, and with it, the Appalachian Brotherhood was gone, leaving behind a plethora of weapons, defenses, and intel for whomever would come upon their remains. This, however, would not be the end of the Brotherhood's story in Appalachia. Years later, Roger Maxson, unaware of what had become of the chapter, would send a group of soldiers known as the 1st Expeditionary Force to journey east, tasked with uncovering the fate of Taggarty's Brotherhood. And in the year 2104, the 1st Expeditionary Force would arrive in West Virginia in order to reclaim and rebuild the Brotherhood in Appalachia. The year is now 2135, and Roger Maxson would die of cancer and be replaced by his son, Maxson II, with his grandson joining the ranks as a paladin. By this time, the West Coast Brotherhood had ceased recruiting new members from outside of their bunker and would embrace isolationism and their mistrust of the outside world. By 2150, the Brotherhood would clash with a raider gang known as the Vipers. The conflict would drag on for years and would reach its peak in 2155 when High Elder Maxson II was killed with a poison arrow. Following this, his son, John Maxson, was promoted to the Elder Council and would task a paladin named Rhombus to lead a campaign to exterminate the Vipers once and for all. This campaign was a success, with the Vipers being nearly wiped out completely, never again regaining the strength or numbers they once had. This would lead both John Maxson and Paladin Rhombus to ascend the ranks of the Brotherhood, with Maxson being named the new High Elder and Rhombus being promoted to Head Paladin. By this point, the Lost Hills chapter of the Brotherhood had become a major power in the region, establishing trade relations with the surrounding settlements, and with towns such as the Hub regularly sending supply caravans to the Lost Hills bunker, the Brotherhood was able to maintain a steady flow of resources. However, things would take a turn for the worst when the Brotherhood discovered the presence of a new threat greater than anything they had faced prior. In October of 2161, a Brotherhood patrol would find the remains of a dead super mutant in the Badlands. After researching the mutant's body, the Brotherhood's head scribe would discover that the super mutants were sterile, but likely created in a central location. Fearing the potential of a super mutant invasion, the Elder Council would halt recruit training and send scouts north and east to search for the source of these abominations. However, only one of these scouts would return alive, reporting a violent encounter with a large group of over 20 super mutants. The situation would only continue to deteriorate, as reports of caravans vanishing were becoming more and more frequent, and rumors began to spread about a super mutant army known as the Unity mobilizing in the north, led by a mysterious figure known only as the Master. Despite growing concerns, the Council refused to act without proof the army even existed, considering their scouts either returned empty-handed or never returned at all. However, the solution to their problem would come in the form of your player character in Fallout 1, known only as the Vault Dweller, who arrived at Lost Hills after rescuing a Brotherhood initiate from a gang of bandits that same year. In order to prove his worth to the Brotherhood, the Vault Dweller would embark on a suicide mission to recover a holodisc from a Brotherhood soldier who had disappeared years before in a radioactive dead zone known as the Glow. Against all odds, the Vault Dweller would emerge from the Glow alive, holodisc in hand, a feat which earned him a place in the Brotherhood of Steel, making him the first outsider to be recruited in nearly 2 decades. Having proven themselves to the Elder Council, the Vault Dweller would be informed that the Brotherhood had discovered the source of the Unity, and would be granted a squad of assault paladins under their command to strike at the heart of the mutant threat, the Mariposa military base. The very place where Roger Maxson first discovered the forced evolutionary virus had become the breeding ground for the super mutant army, with the Unity abducting wastelanders and forcefully dipping them in tanks of FEV, turning them into the mindless abominations that populated their ranks. The Vault Dweller would infiltrate the base and trigger its self-destruct sequence, dealing a crushing blow to the Unity by obliterating the source of their mutant army. Following this, the Brotherhood would entrust the Vault Dweller with one final mission: to hunt down the Master and end him. The Vault Dweller would track the Master to a cathedral in the heart of Los Angeles, now known as the Angel's Boneyard. There, he would confront the Master and would succeed in his defeat. The death of the Master would then activate the cathedral's self-destruct sequence, with the Vault Dweller just barely escaping the ensuing explosion with their life intact, putting an end to the Unity once and for all. Rather than rejoin the Brotherhood, the Vault Dweller would disappear into the desert, leaving them to usher in a new era of peace for the wasteland. After the fall of the Unity, the Brotherhood helped push back the remaining mutants, and over time began to thrive once again under the leadership of John Maxon and head paladin Rhombus. Over time, they would come to interact with the rising New California Republic, maintaining good relations at first, with one state even being named after their founder, but refusing to join, continuing to operate in isolation. Their refusal to adapt left the Brotherhood critically unprepared when around 2240 they discovered the existence of a far more advanced faction known as the Enclave. If you want to learn more about them, you could find my video on them here. Determined to uncover their secrets, the Brotherhood would quietly reactivate a string of outposts across Northern California to gather intel on the Enclave, setting up a base in the ruins of San Francisco manned by only one soldier named Matt. The following year, Matt would interact with the Vault Dweller's grandson, known as the Chosen One, and tasked him with stealing vertebrate schematics from the Enclave's primary refueling base, known as Navarro. But even if the mission succeeds, their victory is short-lived, as 2 days later, Matt would meet a brutal end at the hands of the Enclave enforcer, Frank Horrigan. Luckily for the Brotherhood, soon after, the Chosen One would go on to infiltrate their headquarters, defeat Frank Horrigan, and activate the facility's self-destruct sequence, finally putting an end to the Enclave. In the aftermath, the Brotherhood of Steel would dedicate themselves to hunting down Enclave stragglers, and their victories would allow them to expand their influence across the West Coast, establishing a new chapter in the Mojave Wasteland, claiming territory across parts of California and Nevada. Meanwhile, an expedition force was sent out east to the capital wasteland in Washington, D.C., under the command of Star Paladin Owen Lyons, with the goal of searching the region for lost technology. From here, the Brotherhood's timeline splits, with West and East Coast chapters concurrently moving forward on separate paths. While it doesn't matter which one you watch first, for now, let's turn our attention east to Fallout 3. The Brotherhood expedition would make its way east, all the way to the capital wasteland in Washington, D.C. by 2255. There, they would discover the ruins of the Pentagon, which contained intact stockpiles of weaponry and pre-war technology. But the crown jewel of their findings was a massive pre-war robot by the name of Liberty Prime. A technological marvel that, if restored, could help rebuild the Brotherhood's influence and power in the eastern United States. Lyons would receive orders from his superiors in the West to establish a permanent base within the Pentagon, which they would rename the Citadel. After completing setting up their new base of operations in the capital wasteland, Lyons would send scouts out to scour the region for any advanced technology they could find. One of their first targets would be the ruins of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Nicknamed the Pit, at the time the city was overrun with raiders, mutated beasts, and a plague that twisted human survivors into feral monsters known as Trogs. Following this discovery, Lyons would order his men to conduct a full purge of the city. In a single night, his forces swept through the streets of the Pit, eliminating anyone who fought back and taking anything of significant value, including about 20 unmutated children who they later raised to join the ranks of the Brotherhood. The operation, later called the Scourge, supposedly cost Lyons' troops only one casualty, an initiate named Ishmael Asher, who was buried under a pile of rubble and presumed dead. However, miraculously, Asher survived and would abandon the Brotherhood, using his superior technology to fill the power vacuum and seize control of the Pit. There, Asher and his gang of Pit Raiders ruled with an iron fist, enslaving the residents and forging the city into a brutal steel-producing stronghold. Back in the capital wasteland, Lyons would be made elder of this DC-based chapter of the Brotherhood, now known as Lyons Pride. Around this time, scouts uncovered a new threat, a strange breed of super mutants terrorizing the ruins of downtown DC. Convinced that they posed a danger to the wasteland, Lyons launched a long series of campaigns to wipe out the mutant threat, abandoning the Brotherhood's original mission of simply recovering technology. Leading many of these campaigns was Owen's daughter, Sarah Lyons, whose reputation as one of the Brotherhood's best soldiers only grew as she fought relentlessly against the mutant hordes in the streets of DC. As time went on, Lyons Pride slowly began to abandon its isolationist ideology, forming alliances with the locals throughout the capital wasteland. One such alliance saw the Brotherhood aid a local team of scientists, led by a couple named James and Catherine, with the development of Project Purity, an ambitious plan to create a large-scale purifier inside the Jefferson Memorial to supply the wasteland with limitless clean water. Despite their help, the project collapsed in July of 2258 after Catherine's death, prompting Lyons to withdraw his forces from the purifier. Other alliances made by the Brotherhood included a local settlement called Rivet City and a radio show host known as Three Dog, who spoke favorably of the Brotherhood in exchange for protection. It was around this time that a young squire named Arthur Maxon, the latest heir in the Maxon bloodline, was sent from California to train under Lyons' command and be groomed for future leadership. As Lyons' ambitions grew, his superiors at Lost Hills began to suspect that he had abandoned his original mission. When this was confirmed to be true, they ordered him to cease all of his unauthorized operations in DC. Lyons would refuse, believing that helping the people of the wasteland was more important than hoarding technology. In response, the Elder Council at Lost Hills severed all contact and reinforcements to the capital wasteland, cutting off Lyons' pride from the rest of the Brotherhood. Left on its own without backup or resources from the West, Lyons' Brotherhood began to falter. As the war with the super mutants wore on, the Brotherhood began to lose soldiers at a rapid pace. To make matters worse, not everyone in the Brotherhood agreed with Lyons' mission to protect the people of the wasteland. Many knights and paladins saw it as a waste of men and resources, believing the Brotherhood should stick to the old ways of isolationism and hoarding technology. Tensions would boil over in 2276 when Lyons refused repeated requests from his paladins to reclaim Fort Independence. As a result, a group of deserters led by Paladin Henry Kasdan stole equipment and weapons from the Citadel and claimed Fort Independence for themselves, solidifying their desertion from the Brotherhood. From there, these soldiers would be known as the Brotherhood Outcasts. To differentiate themselves from Lyons' pride, they would don red and black power armor and devote themselves to the Brotherhood's old ways of isolation and the preservation of technology. This loss of men was a crippling blow for the Brotherhood, and by 2277, Lyons' pride would be a shell of its former self. Deprived of soldiers, supplies, and morale, the future looked bleak for Lyons' pride. However, things would take a drastic turn with the unexpected arrival of Dr. Madison Lee to the Citadel. Lee, who was in a state of shock, frantically informed Lyons that Project Purity had been brought back online by its former head researcher, James, with the help from his child, your player character, the Lone Wanderer. However, just before it was activated, a detachment of Enclave soldiers swept in and seized control of the Jefferson Memorial. To prevent them from utilizing the purifier, James would flood the activation chamber with radiation, sacrificing himself and allowing his son and the rest of the scientists to escape with the activation code. With the unexpected return of the Enclave and the knowledge that the purifier could be made operational, Lyons began mustering what little forces he had and began a new campaign to stop the Enclave and reactivate Project Purity. His first orders were to the Lone Wanderer, who he sent to Vault 87 in order to secure the key to activating Project Purity, a Garden of Eden creation kit. Meanwhile, he ordered Dr. Lee and Scribe Rothschild to set their sights on finding a way to bring Liberty Prime back to full operation. However, the Lone Wanderer's mission quickly went sideways as the Enclave infiltrated Vault 87, capturing both him and the Gek and transporting them back to their base at Raven Rock. However, by some miracle, the Lone Wanderer managed to escape, triggering Raven Rock's self-destruct sequence and crippling the Enclave in the process. Even with the destruction of Raven Rock, the Enclave was now in possession of the Gek, and thus, all they had to do was decipher the activation code to utilize the purifier for themselves. Elder Lyons, in a Hail Mary attempt to defeat the Enclave before they could decipher the code, activated Liberty Prime, unleashing it alongside a Brotherhood strike force led by Sarah Lyons in a massive assault on the Jefferson Memorial in order to retake Project Purity. The Enclave was unprepared for this attack, as Liberty Prime tore through their defenses, while Sarah Lyons, accompanied by the Lone Wanderer, pushed all the way to the control room of the Purifier. There, they entered the access code, and Project Purity was finally activated, flooding the tidal basin with clean, fresh water, marking a hard-fought victory for Lyons' Brotherhood and the people of the Wasteland. However, the shockwave generated at the moment of activation threw both Sarah Lyons and the Lone Wanderer into a coma that lasted 14 days. During this time, Elder Lyons ordered that the purified water was to be distributed freely across the capital wasteland, winning the Brotherhood the support of its people. With Liberty Prime at their side, Lyons' forces continued their campaign against the now weakened Enclave, forcing their soldiers to scatter. After awakening from their coma, the Lone Wanderer would promptly be promoted to Knight by Elder Lyons. But even with Raven Rock destroyed, the Brotherhood suspected the Enclave was still somehow able to communicate with one another, based on transmissions their scribes had intercepted. The Brotherhood would track these transmissions to their source, a satellite relay station in the southwest of the capital wasteland. The Lone Wanderer was ordered, alongside Paladin Tristan, to wage an assault on the Enclave's relay station. In addition, the Brotherhood would also redeploy Liberty Prime to aid them in their mission, effectively tearing through the Enclave's defenses with ease. However, once the group reached the relay station, they realized that they had been lured into a trap, as Liberty Prime was bombarded by a barrage of missiles from the sky and destroyed. This, however, did not stop the Brotherhood forces, who still managed to overtake the station and recovered some encrypted data that would reveal the location of the Enclave's final stronghold in the capital wasteland, the Adams Air Force Base. Ultimately, the Lone Wanderer would be sent to infiltrate the Adams Air Force Base, armed with a powerful Tesla cannon that would tear through the base's remaining soldiers. During this infiltration, the Lone Wanderer would sabotage the Enclave's orbital weapons and would redirect the payload to the Adams Air Force Base. This led to a massive orbital strike that devastated the base and wiped out all remaining Enclave forces, putting an end to the war for the capital wasteland. The Brotherhood emerged from this conflict stable but weakened, suffering heavy losses and shortages of soldiers and supplies. In the following year, Elder Owen Lyons would die of natural causes, with his daughter, Sarah Lyons, being killed in battle not long after, leaving Lyons Pride without a leader. Despite these setbacks, the Brotherhood pressed on, pouring their efforts into captured Enclave technology and beginning construction on a project more ambitious than anything they had attempted before, one that would allow the Brotherhood to rise to its full power once again, and usher in a new chapter for the Wasteland. Now is where we move back in the timeline a bit, back to the 2260s. Back on the West Coast, conflict began to arise between the Brotherhood and the NCR, resulting in skirmishes between the two factions becoming a common occurrence during this time. While this was all happening, the Brotherhood had established a new chapter in the Mojave Wasteland, led by Elder Elijah. The formation of the Mojave chapter was mainly a result of disagreements within the Council of Elders. Elder Elijah had pushed for the Brotherhood to develop new and more unorthodox technologies instead of just recovering old ones, an idea that the Council considered dangerous. To keep his ideas from spreading within the Brotherhood's leadership, he was reassigned east to the Mojave, where he established this new chapter of the Brotherhood. There, his Brotherhood found an intact military bunker in Hidden Valley and turned it into one of their bases of operation. Soon after, they discovered the existence of a fully intact solar power plant known as Helios 1. Elder Elijah, already viewed as unorthodox, ordered it seized and turned into the chapter's new headquarters, despite heavy objections from his paladins, who viewed it as tactically unsafe. For several years, this chapter of the Brotherhood operated freely within the Mojave. During this time, Elder Elijah grew increasingly ambitious, even envisioning a plan to restore Hoover Dam under the Brotherhood's control. But everything changed in 2273 when NCR forces marched into the Mojave and occupied Hoover Dam. After their failure to capture the dam for themselves, Elijah became obsessed with Helios 1, vowing to defend it from the NCR at all costs. By 2274, NCR forces discovered the existence of Helios 1 and sought to take it for themselves, just as Elder Elijah had predicted. This inevitably led to a full-scale guerrilla war to break out between the two factions. After 2 full years of warfare, by 2276 the NCR launched Operation Sunburst, a massive offensive conducted with the goal of seizing Helios 1 once and for all. As the battle dragged on, it became clear that the Brotherhood was on the losing end of the conflict. In the midst of the fighting, Elder Elijah uncovered a technology within Helios 1 that he believed could be their salvation, known as Archimedes 2. a pre-war satellite artillery system capable of unleashing a devastating strike against the NCR from above. Convinced it could turn the tide of the battle, he threw himself into trying to activate it despite his men encouraging him to retreat. But before he could do so, the NCR was able to push the Brotherhood out of Helios 1, and at long last seize the facility for themselves. By the time Paladin McNamara finally gave the retreat order, more than half the chapter lay dead, and amid the chaos of the battle, Elder Elijah had vanished. Following this, McNamara would assume command of the Brotherhood, and would mark Elijah for execution for his desertion. In the years that followed, scattered reports placed Elijah somewhere within the ruins of the Sierra Madre casino, and rumor has it that it was there where he uncovered a technology even more dangerous than Archimedes 2 to harness for himself. Now the new elder of the Mojave chapter, McNamara, fearful that the NCR would discover their secret base at Hidden Valley, would limit Brotherhood activity to night patrols, reconnaissance, and the occasional supply run, in order to avoid discovery at all costs. This remains the last confirmed state of the Mojave chapter of the Brotherhood, and whether they endured in isolation, saw a change in leadership, or ultimately fell to another power is left uncertain in the records. After the Enclave's fall at the Adams Air Force Base in 2277, the Brotherhood spent years salvaging wreckage and Enclave tech to create their iconic airship known as the Pridwin. With the oversight of Proctor Ingram, the airship was completed by 2282, giving the Brotherhood an aerial edge in the wasteland. Meanwhile, the previously mentioned Arthur Maxson had become a prominent figure in the East Coast Brotherhood, striking down the super mutant warlord Shepard by the time he was 15, and in the following year, managing to restore relations with the Brotherhood outcasts, reuniting the East Coast chapter under one banner. Not only that, but Maxson also managed to re-establish contact with the West Coast Brotherhood, denouncing Elder Lyon's actions and regaining their full support. For his achievements, he was appointed elder, becoming the youngest leader in Brotherhood history at the age of 16, steering the Brotherhood in a more authoritarian direction. Around this time, a recon squad known as Artemis was sent into the Massachusetts Commonwealth to recover lost technology. One by one, its members were cut down by raiders, ghouls, and super mutants until only a single survivor remained, who would disappear into the wasteland. After they failed to return from Massachusetts, in 2287, Elder Maxson would send Recon Squad Galactus, led by Paladin Dance, to discover the fate of Artemis and establish a foothold in the Commonwealth. After weeks of brutal fighting and heavy losses, Paladin Dance and his squad managed to secure the Cambridge police station as a base of operations. It was there that Scribe Halen detected fleeting bursts of advanced energy signatures, which would later confirm the existence of a mysterious faction known as the Institute. The Brotherhood would come to discover that the Institute was a hidden underground collective of scientists responsible for creating synthetic humanoids known as synths, with their latest design, the Generation 3 synth, being nearly indistinguishable from humans. With these machines, the Institute had begun quietly replacing the people of the wasteland with identical synth counterparts, allowing them to pull the strings of the Commonwealth from the shadows. Concerned that such technology could spell disaster for humanity, Elder Maxson would immediately lead an expeditionary force into the Commonwealth in order to eliminate the threat of the Institute before it could do any more harm to the people of the wasteland. While it is unconfirmed which ending of Fallout 4 is canon, we do know that the Institute was infiltrated and ultimately destroyed, allowing Maxson's Brotherhood to consolidate their power and expand its reach and influence over the years. Back on the West Coast, the Brotherhood had begun to re-establish itself as the dominant force in the wasteland after the New California Republic was crippled following the destruction of their capital city of Shady Sands. By the year 2296, the LA chapter of the Brotherhood operated out of an airbase under the leadership of Elder Cleric Quintus. Quintus was a Brotherhood zealot who preached that power must be taken rather than given. Around this time, the LA chapter of the Brotherhood would be contacted by Maxson's forces, who tasked them with tracking down an Enclave defector named Siggy Wilzig. who carried with him a cold fusion reactor capable of providing limitless energy to whomever was in its possession. The Prydwen would be sent as backup for the LA chapter, and with its arrival, the Brotherhood's manhunt was underway. Despite the Brotherhood's relentless pursuit, the reactor would eventually be delivered to Lee Moldaver, leader of the NCR remnants, who planned to use it to power the city of Los Angeles. Upon discovering the reactor's location, the Brotherhood stormed the NCR headquarters at the Griffith Observatory in a brutal assault. While the NCR soldiers fought hard to defend their stronghold, they were ultimately overrun, with Moldaver being killed in battle and the Brotherhood claiming the observatory for themselves. While the ultimate fate of the cold fusion reactor is uncertain, it appears to have fallen into the hands of Maximus, one of the protagonists of the Fallout TV series, who seems to be hiding it from his fellow Brotherhood soldiers in this promotional poster for the new season. Will the Brotherhood seize the cold fusion reactor? What factions will arise to challenge them? I guess we'll have to find out in Season 2. Hey guys, thanks for watching my video. I'm sorry I haven't uploaded in the past year. I was on study abroad and I didn't have much time to work on anything besides that one Oblivion video, but I'll try to be more consistent going into 2026. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you have a wonderful day.